Pull wheels down and disappear. Miss Cole asked about you just 3 days back. I had no answer to give her. Told her that you moved way out west to write some songs and grow a little more bitter. Kids talk about you around here like you're some kind of legend. Wonder if they know 1,000 sunrises ago you were eager just like them. If you ever decide to bring your pain and your pride back to this side of Oklahoma City, there'll be a porch light on from the post you leaned on before you wound up on the wrong side of it. And oftentimes I pray for you, and oftentimes I don't, as if the goodbyes that haunt you with fear of new hello won't stay for long, cause you won't stop your running. Wait for tomorrow till tomorrow's not coming. Mr. Lucas Ricky, go! Richard landed in Tulsa while he slipped away. Is that the reason you're fleeing? Fields we haul hay. Heat this July or the dark last December. Look in my eyes and you might remember. Weed out in Norman, Stillwater Strip. Run far enough, boy, and you're bound to trip. If you ever decide to bring your pain and your pride back to this side of Oklahoma City, be a porch light on from the post you leaned on before you wound up on the wrong side of pity. And oftentimes I pray for you, and oftentimes I don't, as if the goodbyes that haunt you, fear new hellos, won't stay for long, cause you won't stop your running. Wait for tomorrow till tomorrow's not coming. If you ever decide to bring your pain and your pride back to this side of Oklahoma City, be a porch light on from the post you leaned on before you wound up on the wrong side of pity. And oftentimes I pray for you, and oftentimes I don't, as if the goodbyes that haunt you, fear new hellos, won't stay for long, cause you won't stop your running. Wait for tomorrow if tomorrow's not coming. It's pretty cold up here. My guitar went crazy out of tune, but we're still doing it. Everyone feeling okay? Not freezing too bad? That's real nice. I'm so sorry we're having you guys bear through this evening.
Hey, Sandy.
Miss time you loved me when you actually did. When I was just a wild-haired, messed up kid. Told me that I smell like pipes and spirits. You'd give anything at all to be anywhere near it. Grow so fond of thinking meant to be free. But what if letting go is what's killing me? Never felt this beat down before. Soon as I'm back up and coming back for more. And I hope you find whatever it is you need, leave it behind. The wreckage, you and me, I pray you go. Oklahoma, so I can head back home and be the man that's never known you. Well, how to move the mountains, rode every damn star, to have the slightest idea who you actually are. One more moment of you laying right here. I wrote you songs you'll never hear. Started out feeling like a damn rebirth, till the laughing stops and you lose your worth. You question it all when you lie in your bed, 'cause you can't take back any love you give. And I hope you find whatever it is you need, leave it behind. The wreckage of you and me, and I pray you go back to Oklahoma, so I can head back home and be the man that's never known you. Well, I hope you find whatever it is you need, leave it behind. The wreckage of you and me, and I pray you go back to Oklahoma, so I can head back home and be the man that's never known you. Old friend, it's been a while, I ain't spoke to you in years, and oftentimes
Oh, fuck. What's up, guys? What's up, Brittany? Isaac, do you want to come up or are you indisposed? Understandable, man. I appreciate you hopping in the stream, though. Brittany, how are you doing today? So what do you guys want to do today? You want to watch YouTube? Or you guys want to talk? Ooh, we can watch YouTube. Thanks to Turkey Tom for today's episode. You guys should go check him out on YouTube. You should put out a 3-hour video today about Chris Chan. Even though I said I know I would stream every episode of the Chris Chan documentary, gotta spread the love, I think. Is that appropriate? Yeah, is that appropriate? Turkey or Tom, if you see this video. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna go on Twitter or you know what? We're gonna watch the Turkey Tom documentary. Well, you guys are gonna watch the Turkey Tom documentary. I am gonna go on Twitter and see if I can enjoy myself, or see if I can, yeah.
$300 for that and $2,000 for this. Way too expensive. But today I'm going to show you guys how to get all this stuff.
Fucking ads.
First, go to one of your favorite gaming websites. Select the products you want, then click on my browser extension.
Boom, literally money saved in one.
Chris Chan is often called the most documented person on the internet. From an extensive wiki to thousands of YouTube videos, millions of onlookers who have jumped on to observe the story, it's hard to name someone more synonymous with modern internet culture. And even with Chris being a subject of forum talk for more than a decade at this point, it seems like people are hardly losing interest. So today, we'll try to cover the entire story of everyone's favorite, or least favorite, internet celebrity. Chris Chan's story starts and ends with women, and with one in particular, his mother. Her allegedly abusive parenting being why he became the most documented individual in the world. And it was on account of his unspeakable acts toward her that he was suddenly pulled out of the public eye and into a jail cell. Seeing as he was just released from that jail cell, everyone's worried about what's next for Chris. It's natural to think history will repeat itself, but many still don't know the full extent of that history. A history which spans over 40 years, with its groundwork being laid even prior to that. It all started in the year of our Lord, 1980, when a 53-year-old Bob Chandler and a 39-year-old Barbara Weston got married. Barb was involved with a few other men before Rob, such as a man named Ron Coleman Yeats Sr., who she had a child with by the name of Cole. Barb, however, disputes this and claims to have never been involved with Rand, but with a man named Jack Smithy, with whom she supposedly had a fancy wedding. Cole grew dubious of his mother's claims about who his father was and decided to hire private investigators to settle the matter. In emails he eventually exchanged about the pursuit of the identity of his father, Cole said, "It seems likely, since Rand's middle name is Coleman, that this man is my biological father." However, Barbara never spoke of this marriage. I would never have known about it had I not made a special trip to Richmond to get copies of all of her marriage certificates. Can you imagine having an essential part of your personal family history shrouded in mystery for 44 years because the one person who could clear the air insists on lying to you? Barbara hung up the phone in my face when I asked her about these revelations. Needless to say, I really don't give a fuck about Barbara or about her fucking lies. In 1966, when Cole was 3 years old, Barbara began a relationship with a man named Jerry Harmon Jr., who would become Cole's stepfather. Another finding of Cole's investigations was that Barb never actually married Jerry despite her claims of having done so. A trend of dishonesty was forming. In an email about the domestic situation during this time, Cole said, "Barbara is mistaken about the bunch of good years we supposedly had together. I grew up in an abusive household with Barbara and my former stepfather Jerry, where physical and mental punishments ran the gamut, from bare beatings to cold showers to bizarre scenarios acted out with glee by two deeply neurotic adults. The treatment I received in Richmond, Virginia was another matter altogether. To raise a child in such conditions is inexcusable. Even at a very young age, I knew they would abandon me. They were both irresponsible and incompetent parents who exposed me to traumas that I would rather not remember. As for Barbara professing her love for me, I have not seen any evidence of it in close to 20 years, and that's a very long time. Barbara's definition of love is a hackneyed sentimental term she uses to extract a response. At some point in the early 1970s, Barbara nearly killed Cole when attempting to scare off a would-be robber. A burglar tried to break in when my dad was out cheating on my mom. We had a steel front door. Some dirtbag was making no bones about trying to break down our front door. Richmond was the capital of America at the time. My mother Barbara left the living room for the adjacent bedroom, where said pistol sat waiting. She returned with a fully loaded gun. I stood beside her about 10 feet from the door, where the would-be thief was still loudly at work trying to break down the front door. My mother pulled back the hammer, attempting to cock it, but she didn't pull it back far enough for it to lock. Blam! The gun fired. The bullet hit the floor, ricocheted onto the steel door, then onto the ceiling, before lodging in the plaster wall less than a foot to the left of my head. The would-be thief was scared off, so mission accomplished there. But I could have easily died. In 1978, Barbara and Jerry separated, and not long after, Cole moved to California, presumably to get as far away as possible from his dysfunctional mother. Despite being directly connected to the endless odyssey of Christery, as it's often called, Cole is a relatively normal person. After they both separated from their respective spouses and married one another, Bob and Barb didn't see their advanced ages as a reason to avoid conceiving a child. Whether this was due to their lack of knowledge of the risks, carelessness, or a mixture of both is anyone's guess. By 1981, Barb was pregnant, and on February 24th, 1982, a child was born that would change the world forever: Christopher Weston Chandler. Unfortunately, whatever bad parenting techniques were present when Barbara was raising Cole were at least as bad, if not worse, when it came to raising Chris. By 1983, probably due to her lack of interest in raising Chris herself, Barbara hired a babysitter that would end up abusing 1.5-year-old Chris by locking him in a closet. Later on, he would claim that this led to him having autism, although that claim is doubted. This situation caused him to become nonverbal, only occasionally screeching and crying, which made him very difficult to deal with for his parents. By 1985, Chris met the first person besides his parents whom he recalls as a friend, Sarah Nicole Hammer. According to what he himself says in his Wikipedia autobiography, which, yes, exists, Sarah brought him out of his autistic shell and helped him become more social, though she did, every once in a while, take advantage of Chris's less than advantaged intellect by doing things like locking him in a house's crawl space or trying to get him to put a honeysuckle in his mouth. But apart from that, Sarah was actually nice to him. They played hide and seek, rode swing sets, and even roller skated. This was one of the very few times Chris got to be a regular child. A couple of years later, Chris began kindergarten and Bob retired from his job.
My friend, welcome to the stream.
Problems, Bob decided to write Chris a letter for him to read in the future. In the case that he passed away, in one excerpt it read, "I hope I've been able to provide for you and your mother until you at least get to college, and for your mother until she joins me at the great sing-along in the sky, or wherever. Anyway, I expect you to take care of her, love her, and never disappoint her for as long as she lives. I also expect you to never disappoint me, because I will always be with you to help you when the going gets tough, and you need me. Since everything always seems to happen for the best for me and when I need it, I've always felt like my mother was my guardian angel. You look exactly like my mother and I. I didn't plan my life. I just took it as it came along. I seem to have had no control over it. It always came along with what was right for me. Look at me 8 years ago in 1979. When I was really down and out and ready to cash in my chips with heart problems I didn't even know about, your mother, Barbara Ann, helped me through the rough spots, and together we had you. Now I really had something to live for. No better things or events could have happened to me. Your mother and I have done our best for you, and in return, we expect at least that from you, for yourself, and your children." Despite Chris still being mute at the time, it's evident that Bob had high hopes for him, which included college and children. On top of all of that, he emphasized as much as he could, Chris ought to love and take care of Barb, advice which we'll eventually know Chris took to heart in quite a peculiar way. Regardless of Bob's shortcomings as a father, it seems that he did genuinely care for Chris and wanted the best for him, at least based on this letter. As his childhood progressed and he attended speech therapy classes, Chris eventually started speaking again at age 7. This was a relief for his parents, who could now actually communicate with him instead of having to guess what was on his mind. According to Chris himself, he quickly made up for his time in silence by talking a lot with his classmates. Through the entirety of his childhood, Chris's parents showered him with gifts, the brunt of which were video games. For Christmas that year, he was given a Nintendo Game Boy, which eventually allowed him to play Pokemon. As we'll learn later, this culminated in a major timeline shift in Christory. For the rest of primary school, Chris's life wasn't any more eventful than your average kid. He had a crush on a girl for a little while and played lots of video games. However, when he entered 4th grade, something very odd happened. 5 faculty members, ranging from teachers to the principal, as he retells it, abused him by pinning him to the ground, holding his wrists and ankles, and audio taping his cries and shouts. Regardless of how far-fetched or possibly false the story may sound, it must have had some degree of truth to it, since Bob and Barb went as far as suing the school, proceeding to homeschool Chris for the time being. We don't have detailed knowledge about the legal proceedings of this lawsuit, but we do know that it eventually got dismissed. Whatever your opinions about homeschooling may be when it concerns children, in Chris's case, being around other kids was beneficial for him and he needed the social interaction to improve. While taking him out of school might have been necessary due to the treatment he was getting from the staff, being isolated entirely was certain to do him harm. In December of '92, Bob and Barb took Chris to a mall, where they would stumble across the Leonard Bernstein Symphony Orchestra, a band of animatronic bears. During their interaction with the leader of the band, Leonard Bernstein himself, the performer that operated the animatronics behind the scenes, accidentally called Chris Christian instead of Christopher, his birth name. For whatever reason, this deeply struck a chord with Chris, who insisted that his name be legally changed to Christian, a wish that would eventually be granted by his parents and even got coverage in a local newspaper. Later on, it seems Chris believed God himself was acting through that bear.
I am Christian Weston Chandler! So get it through your damn fucking skull and call me the real name that God has been given to me and the bear at Regency Square Shopping Center during 1989.
In 1993, the passion for Sonic the Hedgehog that Chris already had for years at that point would grow to new degrees, with him entering the Sonic the Hedgehog Watch and Win sweepstakes contest, where he won the grand prize, a $1,000 shopping spree at a local toy store. This win was reported on television, making yet another instance of Chris attracting the attention of the media, even as a young boy. By 1996, Barb would retire.
I've been going to therapy. It really has helped me a lot with getting past all the jumbled together.
Retire
I'm
as
sorry
well.
about the ads, guys. I'm broke, but if you donate to the podcast,
his presence was good or bad for him, only time would tell. This was also the year Chris began high school, and in his opinion, these were his happiest years. It was during this period that he became the water boy for the basketball team, and just a year later, he's a manager for it. However, I assume that if Chris was able to exercise that position, it must not have been that serious of a position in the first place. During one of his high school's basketball games, Chris unknowingly received a vision of the things to come. As he tells it, one day during b-ball practice, I was randomly thinking, with a picture of Mighty the Armadillo of Knuckles' Chaotix 32X leaning against one of a bunch of tall lockers in my head, when suddenly the door behind him opened up and out popped this orange hedgehog with a basketball. So I drew and colored him on paper immediately. Bionic the Hedgehog, Sonic's long-lost brother, was born. As you can imagine, it's just a dismal recoloring of Sonic, but orange. Oh, and by the way, in case you didn't figure it out, his name is Bionic because B is for basketball. Along with having crushes on a couple of cheerleaders and involving himself in an altercation that got him demoted to the short bus, his time in high school was marked by a prophetic dream about Sonic being on Game Boy. After getting an F in English, a 16-year-old Chris recorded his very first video dubbed Song of Christian, where he read a poem he wrote and proceeded to meander about other topics.
I hear America singing as I sing of myself, and you experience as I experience. The problems of yourself are my problems. These are the young singing cries of happiness. The children's song is song of laughter. And also, sometimes Mother and I buy some Lego sets to build them together. Like for example, this old bicycle pit shop here. You can tell this is an old-fashioned Lego set on the counter. This is the old-fashioned Lego land on the corner.
If you're already familiar with Chris Chan in any way, you might be able to notice that he sounds different in this clip, almost like he's a different person. His voice is deeper and his speech is clearer than what he later became known for. To some extent, it's almost as if he was just your regular 90s nerd as opposed to the Lovecraftian entity he eventually came to embody. This is due to the fact that during this time, Chris was regularly interacting with people that weren't his beyond geriatric parents, which resulted in him being a lot more socially capable and normal. But normalcy was on borrowed time in the Chandler household. For starters, Chris discovered how to, as he puts it, mass debate in the ripe old age of 16 years old. After figuring out how to break the parental lock on his TV, he figured it out for himself, whatever that means. cartoons. In 1998, the Pokemon anime began being broadcasted, and Chris was immediately hooked, becoming a fan of the series. Shortly thereafter, the Pokemon Red and Blue game would hit the shelves in America, and in a way, Christian's fate was sealed at that very moment. During 1999, Chris's obsession with Pokemon would grow more evident, and in April, he created his first website called CWC's PokeSite, which was meant to be a Pokemon content and news aggregator, which, of course, Chris lacks the competence to maintain. It seems the site's code was based mostly on a pre-built template, and, most likely, was made under adult supervision considering one of the entries on the site's guest book seemed to be from one of Chris's teachers. Throughout most of the year, Chris created playing cards for his Pokemon OCs. His ideas weren't always the most creative, such as Drummore and Symbolic, two Pokemon that were basically just sentient drums. One of these Pokemon, Espinolic, a comically stereotypical Hispanic Pokemon, served as the mascot of the Spanish version of the second edition of CWC's PokeSite. The absolutely broken miscarriage of a website that came as a result of Chris trying to make his website from scratch in HTML instead of using a template. In late August, he made Yoshi into a Pokemon, which set a precedent for him taking copyrighted characters from other franchises and making them into Pokemon. In the year 2000, Chris turned 18 and held a birthday party he eventually wrote about, saying, "We hung balloons and streamers and we laid refreshments out on the table. At the door was 4 of my high school amigas, and one of them brought a friend. We ate pepperoni pizza and drank Pepsi. It was great. As mother lit the candles, I was filling up with ecstasy. After I blew the candles, I was presented with a big jawbreaker from Kelly, an R.L. Stine novel from Sarah, a planner with stickers from Miranda, and a rabbit doll with jelly beans from Tiffany. We watched Good Burger and had fun. After they left, it was done. What did I wish for? I'm not telling." Though they obviously went to his party in the spirit of charitability, the fact that he was likable enough to inspire these girls to humor him is a sign that, despite his problems, Chris was functional, even if in his own way. In the same year, Chris began taking Paxil, a medication to help with his autism, and overall, it seemed like things were headed in the direction of stability. But who could ever predict what was coming next? Chris's interest in Pokemon endured, and he continued to create new Pokemon playing cards while having people from his school sign his site's guest book, complimenting his art. With all of these social rewards he was getting from expressing his creativity through his interests, Chris's ambition and belief in the potential of his creations only grew. During a computer graphics class, Chris was assigned to create a CD album cover, but with the caveat that the image could not include any copyrighted character. Because of his dependence on derivative material, he struggled with this limitation. That is, until he came up with a brilliant idea. If he were to make a hybrid of 2 copyrighted characters, the resulting admixture wouldn't be copyrighted, and thus, it had to be acceptable. The CD, dubbed Christian's Favorite Hits, would feature a picture of Chris himself alongside a few OCs of his, but with one unforeseen addition: the one and only Sonichu, a mixture of Sonic the Hedgehog and Pikachu. He commented on this moment, saying, "It dawned on me at that moment after lunch, much like the random creation of Bionic the Hedgehog during basketball practice in my freshman year, Sonichu just bursted right into my imagination. A blur at first, but then it became more clear and came together very well. So as swiftly as the creation of Bionic, I drew Sonichu on paper from imagination. Then I drew him on my currently open Photoshop program. After checking with my teacher and my father, who is big on copyrights and whatnot, Sonichu was legal then, and still is, and only mine. So, soon after, the CD cover was made, printed, and passed with an A+ grade. And just like that, things would never, ever be the same. Soon after Sonichu's conceptualization, Chris would immediately start making homemade Sonichu merchandise as if he was a real character. One of the girls that went to his birthday party, Kelly, received a Sonichu sweater Chris had made. Though it's a virtual certainty she had no idea what kind of psychotic horcrux she was dealing with at the time. Chris's creative streak would continue to manifest through another assignment he had to do, wherein he would have to document a week of his high school life, which he would dub A Week with Christian Chandler. The cover art is a picture of him wearing an Ash Ketchum hat with his dog, Patty. Above it is the title scribbled in Chris's incomprehensible handwriting, while underneath is the most menacing drawing of Sonic the Hedgehog ever made. This pattern of randomly drawing Sonic's head continued through the project. As in the first page of this assignment, we have this rendition of Sonic looking like he's been run over by a Japanese bullet train. As for the actual content of Chris's paper, it details a pretty uneventful week, with Chris helping his parents move, sleeping during class, playing Pokemon, and reading R.L. Stine books. While most aspects of his life kept their monotonous rhythm, Sonichu festered in the deepest crevices of Christian's mind, taking on a myriad of different forms such as Dark Sonichu, Surfing Sonichu, and Snowboarding Sonichu. A man for all seasons. By June, Chris graduated from high school, though it was not a good experience for him. In his Wikipedia autobiography, he said, "Graduation for me was a sad one then. I only got recognized for my grades with a star pin, yet they had more fancier awards for more important qualities. I should have been highly recognized for my artistic talents I showed in many art classes for the award ceremonies before graduation day. I felt crestfallen greatly from not getting recognized for any of my talents. I excelled in math too, for the love of God. I had gotten over the award ceremony on the graduation day, but to add lemon juice to an open wound, it was dark and rainy that day, and they handed out more talented awards right before handing out any diplomas. When I went up there to get mine, I was feeling depressed, upset, crestfallen, and ticked off. When the award was handed to me, I took it without looking anyone in the eye, and I did not shake anyone's hand. I just walked back to my seat in the graduating crowd. Then, soon after, I just walked the wrong way up the center aisle, found an isolated table, and cried myself out. My mother found me later and comforted me. My father was so ashamed of the way I acted, and he would later still be angry at recalling the moment. Tiffany also found me and gave me a caring amount of condolences back there. I gave her a plush Psyduck as a graduating gift beforehand. But I left out 2 other reasons why I felt crestfallen at graduation. I never got the chance to ask Kelly out on a date, and more importantly, that I was leaving all my close gal friends behind. Soon after finishing high school, Chris would enroll in a community college, though at this point his priority was clearly Sonichu. In CWC's Poke site, he announced that a dedicated Sonichu page was in the works, and a logo for it was released. His indelible originality follows Sonichu and Rosechu with Chikachu and Meichu, the female versions of Pikachu and Raichu respectively, though what function these pieces of OC serve is completely unknown. In October, the Sonichu site goes live and it looks about how you'd expect. Zero improvement whatsoever in website creation since CWC's Poke site 2. As a matter of fact, the Sonichu website is mostly a carbon copy of the Poke site, mostly containing recycled material from it. At around the same time, Chris decides to further his commitment to the Sonichu IP and makes a Crayola medallion of Sonichu's head with his mouth covered with red sauce, like he just feasted on an order of glizzies. At the tail end of that year, he creates Sonichu's female counterpart, Rosechu, which is basically just Amy Rose from Sonic the Hedgehog with little if any changes to her appearance. All of this marks the beginning of Chris's rapidly deteriorating mental health, as his obsession kept growing into unhealthy and straight up odd directions, and he started putting on significant amounts of weight. Though the first half of 2001 was mostly uneventful, Chris began working at a Wendy's in August, his job description being cleaning trays, tables, and carpet/tile flooring, keeping
What's
the place neat,
up?
and serving the
Do you
customers
wanna
with kind, understanding help. Just a couple of months after
you wanna
he was
come up?
hired, however, he was let go. Chris claims this was due to emotional differences and that a manager had a spike on his shoulder against him. Over time, more concrete reasons for his dismissal began surfacing, such as drawing a coworker of his as an ugly Pokemon, or making a child cry by doing a terrifying impression of Donald Duck. Regardless, he made a total of $500 off the job before being fired. 2002 was a pretty uneventful year for Chris Chan's standards, with nothing much happening besides him turning 20 and developing a nigh unexplainable seething hatred for Harry Potter, apparently because it became more popular than Pokemon around that time. In a card he made of himself called Dark Christian, where his Pokemon type is autistic, his ability is knocking out whoever says that they love Harry Potter more than they love Pokemon. The bottom of the card reads, Christian says, kill Harry Potter, revive Pokemon. Early on in the year, his
A free CRM that will help you achieve explosive growth. You'll wipe out all the competition.
21st birthday is ruined by his teacher, as he details. My 21st should have been as nice as my 18th or sweet 16, right? Wrong! I was attending an English class at BCC with this old male teacher. I don't even remember the son of his name. Anyway, on February 24th, 2003, the day of my 21st birthday, he had the nerve to kick me out of his class just because of my doggone autism. If I could do it over, I'd give him a swift kick, but then I might have gotten kicked out of PVC, and violence is rarely the answer anyway. Still though, he wrecked my turning 21. Angry face. The actual reason for him being kicked out of class is mostly unknown, with Chris sporadically saying the teacher randomly ejected him from the class because he was autistic. A more believable iteration of this story happens in one of Chris's retellings of it, where he mentions that the topic of homosexuality came up in a group discussion during class, and Chris, being the fancy gentleman we know him to be, said something offensive. Though we don't know what exactly it was, Chris expounded on it, saying, essentially, when it came to critiquing the papers of the other students, when they started talking about drug use and homosexual content, I wrote with exclamations you'd likely hear from a black person in church. He also emphasizes that the teacher being a man had something to do with it, and how whatever problems he was having in English class went away once he retook the class with a female teacher. Chris also says without explanation that after that day, he realized he needed a female sweetheart. This was the beginning of what would be known as Chris's love quest. Initially, not much changed in Chris's general behavior. He continued to give CDs and gifts to his gal pals, and of course, they all included Sonichu in some form because he genuinely thought it was charming. Being romantically inspired, he wrote the first Sonichu story called Sonichu Sonichu and Rosichu, the genesis of the Love Hogs. Though this story was not illustrated, as the latter entries into the Chris Chan cinematic universe would be, it provided revelatory insight into the inner workings of Sonichu's canon. According to this sacred text, Sonichu came to be when Chris accidentally collided with a Pikachu that stood nearby as he fought a monster. Due to being charged with energy from the Chaos Emeralds, the Pikachu was permanently transformed into Sonichu. Rosechu, on the other hand, was a Raichu that happened to get hit with the rainbow that emitted from the creation of Sonichu. Eventually, for no reason other than Chris's tendency to insert everything from real life into his work, Sonichu and Rosechu kissed and became lovers. About a month later, as Chris resumed his community college classes for the 4th year, he came up with a brilliant idea to solve his problem. He posted up the very first attraction sign, which was a resume to attract a girlfriend. The sign read, 21 and single white male. Shy, smart, young at heart, computer skilled, humorous. A great thinker and go-getter. Natural salesperson. Enjoys good parts of life. Diplomatic, friendly, loves his family. Peaceful, very creative. He's lonely, seeking a cute 18 to 21 single female companion. 18 to 21 years of age, does not already have a boyfriend. Single. Average to slender weight/body type. White. Lives in Charlottesville or Ruckersville area. Does not smoke or drink alcohol. Happy, positive personality. Average/high income. Drives a vehicle. If any men read this huge sign, mind your own business. And to all men with girlfriends, except marrieds and blacks, go jump off a cliff. Have a nice day. You know, I would make fun of the fact that he requires the girl to be average to slender, have income, and drive a vehicle, despite Chris himself possessing none of those things. However, my standards have become so low due to the typical kind of person I cover in my videos that, honestly, I'm just glad he's looking for someone older than 18. Even lolcows used to have standards back then. They should strive to be more like Chris. Oh yeah, don't let me forget to mention that he also emblazoned this sign with some like white version of Sonichu, perhaps to signal how much importance he attributes to the girl being white. This month is also special because that's when Chris makes his debut as a recording artist, dropping his album Christian and the Hedgehog Boys. It's interesting to note that the cover includes Chris alongside Sonic and Sonichu in the foreground, while two black versions of Sonic, at least one of which is supposed to be Shadow the Hedgehog, are in the back, looking upset. The album boasts 8 tracks, all of which consist of Chris reciting parody lyrics over actual songs, not even instrumentals, just full-on songs, ranging anywhere from Backstreet Boys to the Macarena. Seriously, just get a load of So Need a Cute Girl, Chris's rendition of the Backstreet Boys, I Want It That Way.
And I never wanna hear I want a boyfriend.
Another track, Best Friends Forever, is subliminally dedicated
For background
to
context, guys, I've seen Geno Samuel, or most of Geno Samuel's documentary on Chris Chan, so I've heard all of this. We're just watching this because Tom's a great fucking dude.
It is your choice to go with them
He's a
instead
great
of me.
creator. You
Soon
guys
you'll
should
realize you're
seriously
not
go
complete
follow.
because I'm not there. If it wasn't clear yet, Sonichu, along with pretty much every other character he made up, were either self-inserts or blatant wish fulfillment fantasies for Chris. Because of his utter inability to deal with the problems he was facing in his life, he articulated them through his OC. After a few months of his sign being posted up without any takers, as you'd expect, it was taken down by the dean of the college, Mary Lee Walsh.
Cheers, boys and girls.
Chris had a few words to say about her.
Fuck.
That evil witch, Mary Lee Walsh, mocked me and even crumbled my efforts and threw them into my face. It was serious, heart-shattering insults like that which literally shattered my heart to almost nothing and murdered my soul. Like, as if I didn't already understand that love can't be hurried, but they all left a huge impression among the general population that having a sweetheart was illegal in Virginia. Thus, Virginia is for virgins, not lovers. Despite Mary's best efforts, every time she took one of Chris's signs down, he just made more and more of them and posted them up around campus, even creating MySpace and Facebook pages to advertise his pursuit of a boyfriend-free girl. As 2004 began, Chris began mulling over the idea of merging his writings with his drawings and making comic strips for his Sonichu stories. He also tries to negotiate with Mary Lee over emails, saying, "Mary, I've slept on it and I've realized that note hanging is not the way to get attention, and I don't really want to meet with either you nor Susan. No offense. I'll tell you what, let's forget the meeting, and if you will allow my newsletter to stay in distribution, I will do all of the following. I will never hang notes on the wall again. I'll consider stopping my silent treatment on Susan. I'll consider knocking you and Susan up my scale of respect, each by 2 points. 0 equals no respect, 10 equals respect. By newsletter, Chris means Sonichu's news dash, which he thought would more effectively attract girls by mesmerizing them with his artistic talent. Mary wisely chose to not engage with Chris's shenanigans, opting to just remind him of when his appointment was and leave it at that. At said meeting, despite Chris's Saul Goodman tier bargaining skills, he was forbidden from putting up signs as well as distributing his newsletter, which deeply embittered him, leading him to resent Mary and make her the primary villain of Sonichu's adventures from then on.
Oh God, what have I done?
To his no longer existing MySpace account.
Oh God, my Twitter is fucked.
I am very angry at that. In response, plan to incite the masses and hope they demand the return of the news dash so my chances on getting a girlfriend can be restored. I've also declared war on them as well. About a month later, he added that Mary Lee was trying to get him kicked out of college altogether for his stunts, though it's unknown the degree to which that's true, as Chris is a very unreliable narrator. Since he could no longer attract the ladies in the college campus, he took his sign to the Charlottesville Fashion Square Mall. Though initially seeming more promising than his Love Quest attempt in the college campus, it ran into problems at the mall as well. His diary entries go into detail. I've just had my worst trip to the mall. I was working with my heart on a red string of fate when from out of the blue, a jerk cop shattered my heart and ripped up the red string. I am very mad and upset because that jerk took my idea for a fall, just like that expletive at PVCC did. Before I read on, I have to make a note here to explain that the red string of fate Chris mentions is referring to a heart made out of paper that he would throw at girls at the mall, in the hopes they held onto it so that he could reel them in. If this sounds insane, it's because it is. Anyway, Chris continues, I was not bothering anyone at the mall today while I was just trying to sell myself when I got arrested for trying. I fortunately did not go to jail, but I've been stripped of my right to go to the mall by myself. I would be required to bring my mom or dad with me. My independence and my soul were practically murdered. This encounter inspired him to create one of his most famous terms, jerk-ops, a portmanteau of jerk and cops. From then on, whenever something bad happened to him, Chris would find a way to blame it on the jerk-ops. He even made a Pokemon card for them, with the description reading, "This copper fiend wants to shatter the virgin's heart by destroying his tools for attracting a boyfriend-free woman." Within a week of his arrest, and possibly because of it, Chris gets suspended from his college, saying, I got suspended from PVCC by the board, and I have that meddling expletive to thank for this as well. I am super angry. My dad is bloodthirsty for revenge as well. He's going to write to US President George W. Bush Jr. and Laura Bush to help me get allowed back to PVCC. We all curse death upon Mary Lee Walsh. After this, both his diary entries and his attempts at the Love Quest die down for the time being, most likely due to his parents telling him to cut back on it to avoid getting in even more trouble. In the meantime, Chris was mandated to consult a psychiatrist for an evaluation as a result of his community college's board. It has a few noteworthy excerpts, such as, according to his parents, there have been a number of incidents which led to his suspension. They feel strongly that the suspension was unwarranted and did not take into account the patient's developmental limitations. One such occurrence was during an interaction with African American.
If you live life outdoors, then your truck is an important part of who you are. Whether you're a hunter or fisherman, protect your truck's interior with Marathon seat covers. Handmade from Cordura nylon and available in both solid colors and most popular camo patterns. Marathon seat covers are waterproof and machine washable and custom made to fit every make and model. If you're serious about your truck or SUV, then you need Marathon seat covers.
American classmates. These young women were questioning the patient regarding his search for a girlfriend, at which point he told them they could not be his girlfriend because they were not white. This was perceived as racially insensitive, although from the patient's perspective, he was merely pointing out that they did not meet his standard criteria for a female companion. To the surprise of many, the psychiatrist considered Chris to be dealing with autism in a relatively healthy way, despite the occasional mischief he got up to. One interesting point that has been brought up as a consequence of this document is the fact that both the Love Quest and Sonichu, Chris's two most destructive obsessions by far, only began manifesting after Chris began taking Paxil in 2000. Though I'm no specialist on the matter, some have said that Chris should not have been put on an antidepressant, let alone Paxil, which is the most potent SSRI available. Considering how mild his symptoms were up until that point, it would make a lot more sense for him to just have regular appointments with a psychologist instead of being medicated with no follow-up whatsoever. The psychiatrist that did this particular evaluation, however, was not of this opinion, and instead recommended that his dose of Paxil be increased from 20 milligrams to 30 milligrams daily. I bet that after this, Chris improved by leaps and bounds. Regardless, the rest of 2004 was quiet, with the exception of a video Chris recorded in his bedroom singing a few of his songs, wherein he was wearing the outfit he would become almost exclusively associated with. Along with it, he is donning his esteemed Sonichu medallion, completing the Chris Chan uniform to a T. Unfortunately, despite asking Santa Claus for a girlfriend, Chris spends yet another Christmas as a virgin full of rage. 2005 rolls around, and a few posts begin popping up on Chris's website, claiming to be hot chicks who have seen him at the mall, but didn't come up to him for one reason or another. Though few and far between at this point, these were Chris's first proper trolls, first of exceedingly many. However, one of the people that commented this wasn't joking. An actual girl witnessed what Chris was up to at the mall she worked at and decided to seek his website out. This was quite the event, since, up until this moment, Chris never got the time of day from anyone, let alone a girl. Her name was Anna, and in a blog post titled, "The Tale of the Crazy Pacer," she writes extensively about her encounter with Chris, saying, "Once upon a time there was a guy who paced in front of Abercrombie & Fitch. He'd come and do it for hours on end, just walking back and forth. He was an okay looking guy, not evil looking like creepy Lester would pace for his allotted time, then leave. Sometimes as he paced, he would sing or shout. Nobody really could ever tell what he was saying. Oh yeah, and he always wore the same shirt. A nice little long-sleeved red and blue number that had gold crest on the left side and a white collar and cuffs. Someone, I can't remember who, suggested that the next time he looked in, we wave at him.
What's up,
Whoever
G?
suggested it should die, unless it was me, in which case I feel like
You wanna come up, dude?
punishment. Of course, he looked in and we all waved at him. He looked kind of bewildered and sort of scared at first, but quickly caught on and waved back. So we went about our business, doing floor set and junks, and a little while later he came in. I was kind of apprehensive about this. I mean, I've been doing floor set all day and I didn't really feel up to dealing with another crazy, but he came right up to the counter I was standing behind and he looks right at me, all fidgety and twitchy, and this conversation ensued. Chris. He looked to be about 19 years old, right? I busted out laughing because he guessed it right. That's exactly right. See, I know these things. I can just tell how old someone is, he said, kind of proud and still timid at the same time. My name is Christian, but you can call me Chris. I'm Christian W. Chandler. Oh, hi, Chris. So, do angels have names? I found out later that he meant to say, do angels like you have names? Poor guy was so nervous he didn't get it right. Probably, but I don't know. Well, what's your name? Sorry, I don't go for pickup lines, I replied, kind of laughing. His face kind of fell and I felt sorry for him, but he pressed on. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to insult you. I was just asking your name. So what is your name? My name is Anna. Okay, well, Anna, is there any way I could, get your phone number and maybe I could give you a call sometime? No. Well, do you want my phone number then? You can call me on my cell phone. No thanks. So, do you have a boyfriend, Anna? No, I'm not looking for one, though. Alright, well, do you have access to the internet? Yes. Okay, hold on one second, I'll be right back. I nodded, and he went back to his spot where he kept his 2 tote bags and his Sam's Club cup. So, Christian came back and handed me a card with a crudely drawn Sonic the Hedgehog and some other yellow Sonic-looking creature on it, along with Christian's name, email address, and website. It was a homemade business card. That's my email address, and you can just email me sometime, okay? Okay, I said, not intending to email him at all. Despite how awkward these exchanges self-evidently were, you gotta give it up for Chris's autistic riz, even if just a little bit. For a guy with as many setbacks as him, he handled the situation with more dignity than expected. Many guys today are afraid to even approach a girl. On March 24th, he released one of the earliest proper comic book productions, Sonichu Adventure Sub-Episode 1, dubbed Jerkop-tastrophe. Despite being called Sonichu Adventure, it's mostly just about Chris himself, retelling the story about being banned from a mall. On March 29th, an update to his love quest is posted to his diary. Well, at the mall today, my heart had an extremely fast recovery. Then it became majorly shattered again. I went to the mall like normal. I picked up some chicken nuggets and a drink. Then I went to my spot. I pulled up a chair to sit and eat my food. Then from out of the blue, this cute girl approached me and she asked me if I was looking for a girlfriend. Her name was Hannah and she was 18 years old. I said yes and we small talked for a bit. Then she invited me over to Starbucks for coffee. After she left, I became very excited and oh my god, all over. After calling mom and eating my nuggets, I lifted the chair with such cheer and grace and spun around with it like a dancer. Then I put it back where it was. I felt that my love quest had finally come to an end. And I so elated that my shattered heart had a full fast recovery. I went to Starbucks and we talked about basic things. I showed her my Sonichu scrapbook. She was very impressed. I gave her my email and both my phone numbers on a Sonichu site card and she gave me her email address. I was very attentive as I took notes about her and maintained eye contact. As I left her, I gave a double take flirt. That was the rise. Now here comes the fall. As I was sitting at my spot thinking about future steps for later dates, Anna and Dana told me that when they talked to Hannah, she told them she was setting me up in a prank. I could not believe it, so I found and asked Hannah. Sadly, it was true. Then in major shock, Anna and Dana told me that when they talked to Hannah, she told them that she was setting me up in a prank. I could not believe it, so I found and asked Hannah. Sadly, it was true. Then in major shock, my heart shattered again by 85%, and I let out a big, "No!" After that shout, I got kicked out again, and I'm still without the Fashion Square shopping center that I've grown accustomed to after my whole life. So my love quest has restarted, and as for that date of ours, I'll always remember it, but as far as I'm concerned, it does not count as my first date. I was not as happy as I was today in a long time. I'm once again heart-shattered and sad, but I will not give up on my love quest, because there has to be one true boyfriend-free, dateable, non-pranking girl out there somewhere. Poor guy really cannot catch a break. Around this time, Chris finished Sonichu number 0, the first proper edition of the comic book series, the hand-drawn premiere issue as he puts it. The stories in it were mostly reworkings of previous standalone comic strips, complete with nonsensical plots and nightmarishly ugly artwork that Chris Chan later became synonymous with. He also begins drawing new Sonichu releases during his public outings for his love quest, and is even noticed by someone who gives probably one of the best summaries of Chris Chan's essence at this point in their blog post. So Sonichu returned to Alderman today. I'm not sure what to make of him. He sits in his chair and draws his Sonichu comics, harmless I assume, yet I feel like he knows he's different. He knows that the world rushing in front of him is not his own. Surrounded by the brightest students in America, whatever that means, he sits in his chair and draws, 23 years old. I'm not sure he even graduated high school. In front of him, texts of Plato, Faulkner, God, and Kleist swirl. Does he have the capacity to understand these works? Whether he can or not, I'm not sure, but there is something in his eyes that realizes that there is a level of understanding and thought that he is unable to partake in. As he slumps lower and lower in his chair, with each student he eyes reading or holding a book, he falls into himself, into the markers and colors on the page in front of him. He seems intelligent enough to understand that he does not understand, and that is the hardest part of all. I never thought I'd see Chris be described this poetically in my life. I suppose there's a first time for everything. Amidst these sightings, Chris decides to go to the Mid-Atlantic Anime Convention, where he took a few printed copies of Sonichu number 0 and distributed them to whoever would accept. As his love quest sinks to new lows, Chris gets kicked out from
What's
the
up, Brittany?
McDonald's, where he's also been conducting his attraction sign experiments. I'll spare you from hearing the diary entry in its full extent, but the Managerks, Chris's nickname for the managers, started calling the cops on Chris for loitering in their establishment. In later Sonichu episodes, the manager received in-universe stand-ins. One of them was named Married Senor Comic, an alias which is completely unexplainable to anyone with a functioning brain, and for no apparent reason, had robot arms and legs. After Married Senor, Chris's creativity must have run out since the other one was just succinctly referred to as Black Fat Jerk, on account of the fact that, to Chris, that's all he really was. If his diary entry is anything to go by, Chris began explaining his situation to them in song and dance. When one of the managers asked Chris to just have a normal conversation with him, he sat silent for a minute until he came up with possibly the most schizophrenic own ever uttered. I do not speak to any man other than myself, because they have all taken the pretty girls, leaving me with none. What a wordsmith. He followed this up by giving them verbal punishment, the finger, and last but not least, curse ye ha-me-has. What's a curse ye ha-me-ha, you may ask? Well, luckily for us, Chris is demonstrated in video.
Curse ye ha-me-ha!
A month later, a similar situation played out at Target. Hitters called the cops on Chris. He claims that as he was about to give them a prepared speech, 5 cops chased him down, pulled his pants, handcuffed his wrists and legs, and hogtied him. After being briefly taken to county jail, Chris was given a court date for disorderly conduct and trespassing. Later on, he dramatized the situation in a Sonichu comic, as he always did. Fortunately for Chris, after 2 hearings, he was given a $30 fine and had to pay $56 in costs. Within a week of the Target fiasco, he was once again arrested for following too close while driving. And yes, at this point he was a licensed driver, if you can believe it. After his suspension from college was lifted and he started regularly interacting with other people his age again, things relaxed for a while as advances were made in the love quest. After bidding goodbye to Anna, who moved to Utah, Chris makes a few more attempts at finding a date over MySpace messages, mostly to no avail. The first one was Jelena, who turned him down because he seemed too desperate. Then came Lindsay, who consistently rescheduled her dates over the course of 2 months in order to never actually have to see Chris in real life. Fire for our brave hero. But it was around this time that he began to rouse online attention, with a thread on a Sega forum centered around Sonichu popping up. Earlier that year, YouTube was created, so the golden age of Chris Chan was at the gates. Meanwhile, he was getting some traction in his emails. Though his application to become an official Nintendo game tester was rejected, Chris got into regular correspondence with a girl named Megan. On the 1st of November, Megan emailed Chris asking him to buy an episode of Tintin on eBay for her. They had already met in person before in a video game convention a year prior, but it wasn't until these emails at the tail end of 2005 that Chris grew obsessed with her. Though she clarified from the get-go that she wasn't interested in Chris, or anyone for that matter, in a romantic way, this didn't deter Chris, who clearly saw her as a love interest and continued to invite her on dates. To date, Megan was probably the person who had been the nicest and most patient with Chris. 2006 marked a significant rise in Chris buying the most random, useless garbage from eBay, from My Little Pony and Sailor Moon paraphernalia to German World War II photos. Apparently, all of the purchases were influenced by Megan's interests. Based on their emails, we know that Megan was into MLP, Sailor Moon, and for some mysterious reason, Wehrmacht soldiers from World War II. Considering how desperate Chris was to get a girlfriend, it's surprising he didn't start LARPing as a novelty to impress her. Eventually, he got her a Nintendo DS, which she turned down due to the fact that she already had one she bought herself. While Chris was busy spinning his wheels into the mud during his love quest by chasing after an uninterested Megan, he managed to graduate from community college, getting a degree in computer-aided drafting and design. Over time, Chris began wearing her down, continually being pushy about wanting to date her despite her repeatedly saying she wasn't interested. Most likely because of this, Megan severely limited the amount of times they met up in real life to once a week, and even then, Chris would take that as an opportunity to be as handsy as possible, which she obviously wasn't okay with. After months of this dynamic going back and forth, Chris overstepped a few boundaries when he started complaining about Megan being friendly with other guys. This was grating for her since not only were they not dating, but she was also not interested in the guys Chris was paranoid about. This caused her to email him in a slightly stricter tone, saying, "I don't want to have to tell you again or I might get really angry, because you know unwanted remarks or advances to a girl
Are you
is
gonna come
sexual
up now?
harassment, and I don't take that lightly, okay? So can you understand
Or
now?"
are you gonna
Anyway, sometimes I
explain?
get the feeling that you copy me to get me to like you. Like Sailor Moon, for example. The only Sailor Moon thing you had was that adult video, and when I told you how much I love it, then you start getting into it. Kind of like My Little Pony. That kind of thing really annoys me. You make it sound like I have to get your approval to be that kind of friendly to someone. And I felt rather disappointed about those remarks. And you already know I don't love you, so why do you make yourself unhappy by holding grudges and trying so hard to win me over? So please, if you really want to make me happy, please let me make my own decisions and figure out my own life, okay? Besides, even if I had a boyfriend, what makes you think I'll stop being friends with you? I'm not that kind of person who'd say, well, I have a boyfriend now, so see ya. No, I'm not that kind of bitchy girl. You know, I haven't talked to this person in a year. I'm not really wanting to get together with him either. Boyfriends aren't for me. Don't want them, don't need them. However, I can't say I like how much you call him a lucky jerk. Why is he a jerk? Why do you call all guys that? Because they take all the pretty girls, leaving you none to choose from? Hate to be blunt, but that's a pathetic way to think. You don't go to a mall and buy a girlfriend. The thing is, guys didn't take all the girls. The girls just didn't choose you. Quit blaming other men. Personally, I think you shouldn't be so picky about what they look like. All you say is you want a pretty girl. Well, it's the inside that counts. After all, a pretty girl can have the personality of Satan. Meanwhile, an ugly girl may have a heart of gold, but you wouldn't even give a second look, would you? I often wonder, if
Oh,
I was
fuck.
an
No,
ugly
I didn't
girl,
want to do
you wouldn't
that.
even come near me, would you? Little did poor Megan know that the powers of the Chaos Emeralds render Chris impervious to reality checks of any nature. While this drama ensued, Chris never stopped cranking out new issues of Sonichu, all containing the same themes recycled over and over again, such as Sonichu's enemies always being conspicuously black, the text bubbles being randomly placed on the page with no discernible reading order, Chris vicariously defeating his real-life opponents such as Mary Lee Walsh and the guy who Sarah Hammer dated instead of him, so on and so forth. What was noticeable in the later episodes was that, progressively, Sonichu became a secondary character in his own comic, with the protagonist becoming Chris himself. Sonichu's function was primarily to serve and protect Chris, and every once in a while symbolically represent who he wanted to be. Additionally, other than real-life people, Chris also added a character called Crystal Weston Chandler, a female version of himself that seems to simultaneously fulfill the ideal role of the mom, the ideal daughter, the ideal sister, and the ideal girlfriend. The fact that this guy wasn't regularly seeing a therapist is a travesty, to be honest. As Megan put a healthy amount of distance between herself and Chris, his eBay purchases started drifting towards the salacious. Items include Bootylicious Love Doll, Pearl Beaded Prolong Ring, Nina Hartley's Guide to Sex Toys, and my personal favorite, Space Nuts. After years of frustration, Chris began taking matters into his own hands, and following this general theme, he also decided to give up on Santa. Since, for the past 3 years, he was asking for a girlfriend which Santa never delivered. 2007 begins, and Chris begins working on a new project called Yep, I'm on TV, which consists of videos he had recorded on VHS tapes burned onto a DVD. Of course, he had no idea how valuable an archive of his activities would eventually become, and most likely he just did this out of his narcissistic self-obsession with every moment of his life. Later on, the leaking of
Why
this
does Randy Stare sound familiar?
in the CWC lore. But at the very end of this highlight reel about Chris's life, there was one video filmed solely for the purposes of being put into the DVD called Christian Weston Chandler's Future Message.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, and dudes of all teenagers.
In this 9-minute-long prophetic manifesto, Chris summarizes the lessons he had learned up until this point. He did this because, ideally, he wanted this video to be played in schools. In it, he goes on about why going to school isn't torture, why drinking and smoking are bad, the extreme importance of staying straight, and last but not least, that girls should consider dating uglier guys because they will have a better personality and a brighter future. It's around this time that Chris reconnects with Cole, his previously mentioned half-brother, to offer him a copy of his autobiographical.
Oh my god, I've seen that. That is fucking wild. Yeah, I've seen that.
Doesn't want him to. By June, she leaves for Kentucky, and Chris misses her dearly since she was pretty much the only female he could get close to that wasn't his mom. This wasn't the only thing causing him to be upset, though, as by the end of June, Chris's dog Patty, that he had had since 1988, had to be put down. He even wrote his dog a eulogy, saying, "When Patty was brought to the vet on that faithful day, I was distraught, frightened, and concerned for her health. I stayed with her during her final moments with my hand on her head and a tear in my eye. When my mother was brought the paper that gave the doctor permission to send her on her way, I didn't want her to be the one to sign it. I raised Patty since she was a 6-week-old pup, and I wanted to take the strain for signing the one-way ticket. It was hard for me, but it was for the best. So I signed that paper with a crying Sonichu face saying, "We love you, Patty." After that, I gave her my final pets, hug, hand to paw hold, eye contact, ear rub, cheek to fur rub, and I sadly waved her for the final time, and I said, "Goodbye, Patty, I love you." As I stood outside, I heard Patty's last bark saying, "I will always love you, Chris. Thank you." Regardless of how thorny and problematic of an individual Chris Chan is, losing a pet you've had for that long is tough, especially considering how few and far between were his sources of affection. Patty must have meant a lot for him, and it's hard not to feel for the guy. But let's not dwell on this for too long, because Chris did not either. By July, Christian had entered a contest called Chop Chop Master Onion's Rap Showdown, which was created to promote the Parappa the Rapper game that was coming out that year. The grand prize was 2 PSPs and an all-expenses-paid trip to Seattle for the 2007 Penny Arcade Expo, which Chris was hoping to use in order to seduce Megan out of Kentucky and back into his arms. Well, not quite back since she was never there. Anyway, this is Chris's entry if you were curious.
AP Station. My name is Christian Chandler. I live in Bucksville, Virginia. I have a PSP. I like to rap. I play with the rapper. I go with you now. The only song I know is Master Onion.
July was also a very active month for his eBay, and he bought plenty of more sex dolls, adult videos, and masturbation aids of all kinds. Mind you, all of these trinkets, gizmos, and gadgets were bought on the credit card of a nearly 80-year-old Bob. Whenever he wasn't getting busy with those, he was emailing every person he'd ever interacted with in his life to vote for his Parappa the Rapper contest entry so that he'd win the prize. He even tried Cole, but to no avail, since he seemed to be interested exclusively in trashing Chris's parents. This technique must have proved effective since his video made it to the final rounds, but in early August, it was made public that the winner of the contest was not Chris, but a guy named Adam Stackhouse. Chris would put in his 2 cents about this unfavorable result. That stupid, no good Adam Stackhouse won the trip. He had music and more than one person in his video, which were in violation of the official rules. 3 other videos out of the remaining 9, Apraluski, Brutal, and Soria Buckwald all violated the official rules as well. Those 7 people of those 4 videos should have been disqualified. Period. I am so angry of the fact that the PlayStation Company and their promotional associates will not do anything to bring these violators to justice. Sworn on my autism, justice will be served to these 7 people of those 4 videos. Of course, while accusing other people of cheating, Chris overlooked the fact that he himself had made over 120 fake accounts to vote for himself, as he admitted in an email to Megan. Also, his claims that Adam's video had music are based on the fact that Adam beatboxed, which hardly qualifies. In any event, his tirades continued over at his PSN blog. This is directed mostly to Adam Stackhouse, the SOB who was the alphabetically first video in the Parappa contest and got wrongfully the big prize. I loathe Adam and his sister for stealing my one chance at taking my sweet gal friend to Seattle. It would have been terrific. I might have even been able to change her outlook on not planning on having children. She and I are both virgins, although I am a frustrated, high-functionally autistic 25-year-old virgin. I don't have much going on for me, really, because I have been the dog in America's favorite game, Kick the Autistic, for my whole life. I curse those 7 people, between the cast of the 3 illegal videos, to die and burn. As for Adam, if he's reading this and is asking, "You've got something to say to me?" I do. P.S. Fuck you, you dream-smashing son of a bitch. One thing I've neglected to mention is that, while Megan was away in Kentucky, she wasn't checking her emails, so she had no idea what kind of garbage Chris was filling her inbox with. When she returned and saw what he had been up to, she once again tried her very best to shut Chris down. I just want to say that your behavior has irritated me for the last time. First, I'll start off with saying that I'm glad you didn't win the contest, because I have no interest in going on a trip alone with someone who can't keep his hands off me. I'm not your girlfriend and I never will be. When I say, don't touch me, that means don't touch me. What may seem friendly to you is sexual harassment to me. You whine that you're just being friendly, but you obviously have no consideration for my feelings. Also, I can't say I like how you use my photo in your video and on the cover of your comic book. I want them removed from the internet immediately. Since I'm not a MySpace member, I can't view what you post. If there are any photos of me on your blog, I want them removed. And I don't like your Megan obsession. I don't like being a character in your comics. I don't like how you made me a character in Soul Calibur and Animal Crossing. That kind of behavior really freaks me out. With all that said, we're down to 2 options. A, we remain friends and only friends, period, as in no more touching me, following me, asking me personal questions, and giving me things. We can still battle and trade cards. Or B, never see me again. I'm sorry it's
Hey, Maddie, do you want to come up?
Nice way to stop, but you've never listened.
I need someone else here. It's bugging the shit out of me.
Serious consideration, and now know that if you try your advances again, I won't be very nice about it. Despite how clear Megan was being, it would once again fall on mostly deaf ears, as Chris would reply with another email titled, "Ouch, my heart." Trying his hardest to guilt trip and yakking about his love quest once again, concluding it with a declaration of his love for her. A couple of weeks go by and Chris continues sending her love mail, all while purchasing...
No, you do you.
Dolls. Eventually, it seems he did take what Megan said to heart and
Success.
complied with her demands.
That
and she
is
thanks
the
him
ultimate
for it.
goal.
The peace treaty between them didn't last very long after Chris began expressing his distaste for one of Megan's friends who happened to be gay. After being confronted by Megan about it, Chris replied, "Originally, I was not fond of him because it was obvious that he was a homo. Yes, I am a homophobe. I fear them all, and I fear the tormenting temptations of falling off the straight path. But then I mentally, sometimes from a DVD, and if you'll pardon the expression, shove some pussy in my face. I'll tell you what, if I ever stoop down to changing my path, I might as well would get a gender change operation." What a prophetic statement from Mr. Chandler. By some miracle, Megan is once again tolerant and patient with him, saying she understands why he's like this, and she also had a tough time in high school and felt very lonely. In that same month, a new dimension to the CWC story was revealed, as for the very first time, an online community took note of his existence. On a thread about Eulilia on the website Something Awful, Chris gets brought up, along with his Sonichu comics. Soon, he gets his own dedicated thread titled Sonichu and His Quest for a Boyfriend-Free Girl. After 2 decades of people either pitying or distancing themselves from him due to his eccentric sensibilities, Chris finally finds his niche,
Making the switch to Shopify means designing an online store that expresses your brand your way. Choose from tons of free, no-code themes to get started quickly. With drag and drop editing and endless customizations, creating a one-of-a-kind shopping experience has never been easier. Start your free trial
Oh,
today.
I'm so glad.
When advertising on YouTube, I know that making an authentic video with a clear call to action is the key to getting results. That's why YouTube offers tools, resources, and partners to help businesses of all sizes create a
target audience of people who relish in how strange and demented he is. In the thread, people
Fucking
point out
ads.
his website looks like a visual rendition of a grand mal seizure. Some even theorize that there was no way everything CWC made was this naturally awful, and that he must have been doing it on purpose as a really elaborate prank or performance art piece. But a handful of the users actually had experienced Chris in person. One user said, "I posted in the other thread, but I've seen this guy in real life. This is no prank. He used to go to the college I attended until he got kicked out. If anyone here is from Charlottesville, Virginia, you may have seen him also. He hangs around the UVA Alderman Library and the Fashion Square Mall. I had seen him around campus and just thought he was in an anime club or something. I never saw him with his signs. I learned a lot more about him when he messaged my sister on MySpace and invited her up for a soda. She declined and he became increasingly more harassive towards her until she blocked him. Yes, he wears that Sonichu necklace around everywhere he goes." People slowly realized that Chris was definitely not your run-of-the-mill internet weirdo. Not only was it evident he was a special kind of, well, special, but no one up until that point had probed the depths of the Quickiverse. Despite how small of a community there was around Chris and Sonichu at the time, it was like stumbling into King Tut's tomb and finding mountains of archaeological artifacts that had been hidden away from the world for centuries. The same user from the previous post found and shared an updated and enhanced version of the attraction sign on Chris's website. This edition included a list of Chris's turns, which are the following: smokers, real drunk alcoholics, gone to Moe's often, current/previous mothers. I support them fully, but I would not feel comfortable walking into a previously made family. I would feel more comfortable starting fresh and having my own children. Real ugly women, currently over 230 pounds, the low functionally mentally handicapped, the seriously physically deformed, autistic, high functional or otherwise, although I myself am high functionally autistic, but that's besides the point. Medium or dark chocolate, police women. What stands out, firstly, is the amount of hypocrisy in this list. Not only does he exclude the ugly, fat, and autistic, all of them being categories many would group him in with, but he says police women are a turnoff when, at this point, he had bought a total of 3 cop-themed blow-up dolls. He also mentions that mothers are a turnoff, but I don't want to get ahead of myself, so I'll save that wretched can of worms for later. In the dark underbelly of the internet, news travels at light speed, and just a little after CWC's debut as a lolcow in the Something Awful forums, discussions about him sprung up in the cartoon and video game boards on 4chan. Unfortunately, because these were from so long ago that 4chan didn't have the reputation it currently has, and consequently, almost nobody archived what went on, we don't have all of this chatter saved. Regardless, we can imagine the kind of discussions that were going on. A few days after the word of Chris Chan had been spread around, someone named Evan from the cartoons board emailed Chris saying, "This is some fan art of Sonichu my friends and I have drawn. I hope you enjoy it." One of the attached images seemed to be a GIF that depicted Chris in a staring match with a Sonic-like figure, and that was the only attachment that wasn't a veiled troll. The first one was a drawing of Chris in his love quest with a sign that said, "No darkies." while the other two were NSFW renditions of Chris and Sonichu doing unspeakable
Every time I hear that, it
because
fucking
of
gets
his
me.
infinite naivete, Chris replied,
Every
saying,
fucking
"Thank you
time.
for your fan art contributions. In constructive criticism, I like the one with me and the girlfriend auditions, as well as my glaring in the eyes of the blue guy. But I am feeling great to test towards the other two. Sonichu and I are not of that nature at all. If you would like to make it up to me, though, please draw a strip of Rosachu stripping for Sonichu and have him fuck her, and draw Rosachu masturbating and squirting." Emphasis added. "I am straight, damn it. I will not be veered in any other disgustingly grotesque direction." Again, most nasty fan arts are not appreciated at all. Please feel free to share that quote with the rest of the fans. Sincerely, Christian Weston Chandler. Attached was an image of Chris and Sonichu staring menacingly, subtitled by the phrase, "We're keeping track." It's bad enough that Chris likes the No Darkies image, but the Rosachu hentai request signals a major shift that Chris was undergoing at this time, from oddball virgin to corrupt perverts. Evan obeyed his wish, but with a twist. Much to Chris's surprise and chagrin, Rosachu was depicted as having a giant penis. Chris replied, "Do me a favor, draw a vagina on Rosachu. Rosachu is a girl. She never had a freaking pickle. If I see one more freaking pickle, and you may spread this quote to other adult fan artists, I will create you in Soul Calibur 3 and beat you up like there's no tomorrow." To which Evan responded with a simple, "Uh-oh."
Oh, by the way, I'm gonna start the trend. If you guys want to come up, you gotta say uppies.
This time, literally and not figuratively. This trolling conflagration hit its peak when an article
And not only that, but
Encyclopedia Dramatica.
I will
After
only
being
respond to
surrounded by two
uppies.
people who seemed to genuinely care, Chris claimed that the article caused him to have the worst weekend of his life, saying a hacking terrorist group, Anonymous, and 4chan are somehow involved in that page. When the article itself mostly went over the things we've already covered, it did so in the typical ED fashion, rife with insulting expletives directed at Chris and his creations. Along with it came a few people trolling on his email, but no one really got to him besides Evan, probably because Chris's attention was directed elsewhere. All of this obviously upset him, and a couple of days later, he expressed his disapproval of the ED page in an uncharacteristically polite and genuine way that it's hard not to sympathize with him. In the video titled Chris Chan's Public Announcement, he simply asked that the page be rewritten in a more favorable light, suggesting edits such as including his family history. According to his headcanon, he was a descendant of Anne Boleyn on his mother's part, despite the fact that Anne Boleyn never had any children. Additionally, he claims to be 1/16 Cherokee through his father, saying, "We're a respected tribe." After apologizing for anything he could have possibly done that wasn't nice, he asks that the page be taken down. Much later, Chris relayed on emails that during this time, he and his mother were badgering the management of the game place for CCTV footage to try and figure out who took that picture of him that was featured on the ED article, which they deduced must be the same person who wrote it. However, they stopped once the owner of the place threatened to ban him for a month. It's really funny how Chris isn't afraid of being arrested by actual cops like he was at Target, but if someone merely suggests taking away his ability to play Pokemon cards with preteens for a single month, he folds just like that. On November 10th, an image of Goatsy was added to the article's gallery of images above the caption, "The true brains behind Chris Chan," and this was the straw that broke the camel's back. That set him off to make an account and try to edit it into a positive light himself. Emphasis on the word try because it seems not even Christian is capable of making himself look better. He removes Goatsy along with words like retarded and scary because he doesn't like them. In the section about Evan's trolling, he replaces the phrase masturbation and squirtin' with just masturbate, and added a couple of notes that said every person is doing it and relief, with a smiley face next to it. In an attempt to defend himself from the accusations that he was racist, Chris edited in the following section. He's also old-fashioned in his idea of a sweetheart. She is not black. He is cool with adoption, but his dream of his future daughter calls for blood, tears, and sentinel descent. His verbal acumen never ceases to amaze me. In regards to the mockery of his attraction sign, he put in the only reasonable and inexpensive idea he could ever fucking think of. There was also some clarification about the medallion, which people were speculating was made of clay, but Chris specifically said it was made of Crayola model magic. This was just the first day's worth of edits. It was a day later, on November 12th, that Chris made the brunt of his most notable edits, such as commenting on his Officer Nasty doll, saying, "Nah, it's just my artificial woman in her plastic blue outfit. Awesome to and the cleaning maintenance is simple. She'll only last until she has her internal injury." Among these discretionary, even humorous additions, he also makes possibly one of the worst mistakes of his life. For absolutely no comprehensible reason, he makes multiple additions to the gallery, all consisting of hand-drawn Sonichu hentai, with the exception of 2 images. The first is titled MaryWantsIt.jpg, a nude Mary Walsh on her evil throne, beckoning with her finger and saying, "Come and lick my pussy, my jerk-off slave." What the fuck? If you can believe it, that wasn't what got him in trouble, but the next image. The infamous Shame Came for Quickie.jpg, which featured Chris with a smirk, a naked female with one hand and doing a thumbs up in the other, captioned with, "Your sister has come for me." Though obviously I can't show the whole image, people have done some anatomical analysis on it in order to understand the inner workings of Chris Chan's creative mind. People began wondering what Chris meant with the caption, because usually when doing trash talk, the target tends to be people's mom, not their sister. Discussions ensued as to what this actually meant to Chris, with some even thinking that the girl in the drawing was Crystal, his imaginary sister slash daughter slash girlfriend. Little did they know that Chris, at least at the time he wrote the caption, believed John, Megan's brother, was the mastermind behind the trolling, and the caption was meant for him. The girl in the drawing was Megan, but no one knew this other than Chris. The rest of that year's edits of the ED page were uneventful back and forth between Chris and the site's moderation. Over in Chris's emails on December 30th, he wrote and sent a poem that's quite the mouthful to say the least.
I see you,
For my
Brittany.
true love,
Do you want to become a ref, by the way?
Sweetly, gently, like a summer breeze.
Do either of you want to become a ref?
Skin gently with my strong fingers. I'd take her to eat and provide for her to my ability. I'd start small at McDonald's, then let it get better in due time. When the mood is right, I'd whisk her in my arms and lift her up in sweet gentleness. If she is...
Meet Brandfolder, a highly usable digital asset management platform that provides companies the ability to organize, manage, distribute, and measure brand assets from a single source of truth.
Thanks, Brittany. I appreciate it.
Let me try.
You're now a permanent referee. Look at you're blue. Type.
Guys, I hate to say it, but you might have to ask a grown-up for help.
Why you? I need to get back. You know what?
She is willing to allow the pleasure. I'd lay her down, caress her gently, tickle her fancy, have her tickle my fancy, and give it to her with the learned, lonely experience I've endured. I have no idea how Chris's post-McDonald's erotica is more articulate than the writing of Sonichu. It's insane to think he thought this would be romantic for a woman to read. By the way, he didn't send this directly to Megan, but to a mutual acquaintance of theirs, who presumably read it before passing it on to Megan. It's unknown if it actually got to her, as there's no email of hers acknowledging any of the stuff said in the poem. For the first 2 months of 2008, there was a great quiet before the storm. That is, besides Chris getting some anal beads that came with another one of his purchases, and Megan briefly living under the same roof as him due to her having issues with her family. Given his reputation for touchiness, I'm sure she tried to keep her time there as short as possible. Their uneasy, but not quite all negative relationship survived until early March, when Megan emailed Chris thanking him for a trade and consoling him over being banned from his local church, which later we find out happened because the pastor found out about his ED page. The tune suddenly changes to a very different one come the 12th, when Chris emails her profusely apologizing, saying he was caught up in the rage when he did that, followed by a string of, "Megan, I'm sorry for hurting you." It's worth noting he doesn't specify what he's apologizing for exactly. This may seem like a random thing, but it's actually because, in their communications outside of emails, Chris was trying to pretend that the girl in the drawing wasn't Megan, but Crystal, as the trolls had supposed. At the time of sending this email, he hadn't quite let go of that lie, hence the vague language he uses. He also promises to take the ED page down, or his name isn't Christian Weston Chandler. Which is interesting considering it used to be Christopher and eventually would become Christine, but that's for later. The next day, he emails her again with some quote-unquote detective work on this 4chan fella that's been ruining his life. In this one, he does specify that he was the one that made the drawing, giving up trying to dodge that particular bullet. On the same day, Megan replied saying, "I just don't know what to say now. I'm very much scared by that image and it will never leave me. And I can't decide what's worse, the image in general, or the fact you intentionally drew it and gave it to the webmaster for that site that you hate so much. Not only have you poured gas on the fire by doing that, adding obscenities to the already horrific site, but you've also embarrassed and humiliated me and degraded and demeaned me, whether you realize it or not. I mean, I'm not that kind of girl, and you know what? So why? And you also lied to me about it. So I'm unsure what to do about this. I can't say I really think of you the same way anymore. I'm sorry to say. I will continue to give the remaining items for the Zune, and that will be all the contact you will have with me unless I decide otherwise. I hope you understand. So we'll let time decide how I feel about this current situation. Until then, please don't come up to me anymore unless it's to give you what I owe, which seems kind of awkward now. I know how it feels to be alone, but I can't keep throwing away my pride little by little just to keep you satisfied, you know what I mean? There has to be enough is enough at some point, and I cannot continue to disgrace myself by forgiving things that I never find forgivable in the first place. I'd like for you to just completely leave me alone for a while until I can sort things out myself, you understand? It's not like I hate you, but I don't see you in the same light anymore, so just leave me be for a while. Let me try to recuperate with my few other friends, and maybe we can just start from scratch sometime. time. Despite this message having a much more final perspective on Chris and Megan's relationship, by some unexplainable reason, she still leaves a window open for possible reconciliation in the future. Chris, in his all-enduring grace, sees this charitable reluctance to completely cut ties with him as an opportunity to cork out the gnarliest, gigantic turd on it. Here's what he replied with. I understand, you may or may not have had much exposure to sexual images as I've had, so the idea of a hand job, which was the act drawn there, as a part of outer course versus intercourse was a surprise to you. I'm sorry. If it helps put things in perspective, I can recommend finding information on the internet through this educational website I found through adameve.com. Or I recommend renting The 40-Year-Old Virgin. That movie touches on some of the issues around sex and how it can really frustrate an older virgin who hasn't had the pleasure yet, or I can loan you my copy of The 40-Year-Old Virgin. The point is allowing yourself more exposure to sex to make yourself more comfortable with that fact of life. While I am on the verge of taking that Encyclopedia Dramatica page down, I understand that there are a number of other web pages of hate against me, and as much as I would like to be able to track down everyone and report them and get on the verge of taking them down as well, someone else may put up another hate page up against me. It's a fact of this modern world known as cyberbullying. As for the drawings, while I have shoved the text information down their throat in an attempt to drown them into submission, there were too many images of pizzas, yetch, on there. I drew drawings promoting vaginas to go against those dickheads. I did the drawing of Sonichu and Rosachu. I did the drawing of Bubbles getting it from Black Sonichu. I had the idea of pairing them up in the comic book anyway. I did the drawings of Angelica and Mary Lee Walsh, that witch hag, masturbating, and I did draw the drawings of me giving you a hand job from among my adult fantasies, with your eyes censored to conceal your identity. It was a massive step outside of my boundaries, and I did it out of anger, and I regret having done it. And I'm really, really sorry. But we all do things in the heat of anger and or out of our boundaries that we end up regretting later. No accountability whatsoever, with the cherry on top being Chris implying the only reason she got upset was because she wasn't as sexually mature as him. To make matters worse, a couple of days later, after getting no reply from her for entirely justifiable reasons, he emails her again asking for her to help him out with the ED page. He also mentions he's been trying to remove or work around mentions of her in the article, and his genius way of doing that is concealing her face by zooming into her vagina in the drawing. This once again sparked Megan's ire, who replied, Look, my main issue is not the website itself, it's just the fact that you drew those weird pictures. Instead of removing that one completely, you just enlarge my crotch. Thanks a lot. Why didn't you just remove it? I don't care how lonely you are. I haven't had luck with relationships either, but I don't boast about being a virgin with rage. When you say things like that, it just makes you sound like you're looking for someone to P.S. I think it's rather amusing how you complain of these people defiling you. Yes, many posts are ridiculous, but you have defiled Mary Lee Walsh and our wonderful security officers who were simply doing their job. Then you defiled me and lied about it. You need to stop with this mindset that the whole world's against you and start taking some responsibility for once. Example, it's wrong to hate these people when you broke the rule by soliciting/loitering. Hey, at least they're doing their job and I support that. In many instances during the general story, there are moments where we can sympathize with Chris, but this certainly is not one of them. He continues to email her, blaming everything on ED and claiming he's the resistance against the alien dominators, whatever that means. Worst of all, he begins defending his drawing of She Came for CWC.jpg, saying, As for the drawing itself, I've realized that it was done not only out of inspired fantasy, angst against ED and love for you, but also a major release for my crazy mixed up hormones. If I didn't have the foresight to put my pent up frustrations and feelings in the form of
I literally,
abusive maniacs.
fuck this
Thank
right
God
now.
for allowing me to release my bottled up frustrations and a more not so politically correct and not